Welcome to the Commonwealth Policy Center Candidate Forum. And with me on this program is State Auditor Mike Harmon. Mike, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
So, Mike, you are the 47th auditor in Kentucky. In fact, I just learned a minute ago that you were the first Republican elected since the late 1960s.
Correct.
Which is not a terribly, or maybe it shouldn't be a terribly partisan position.
It shouldn't be.
But this is something that I think we're seeing people shift their political allegiances, and they're trending more Republican, at least election-wise. But
Correct.
Your position of auditor, when you're sharing some funny stories with me just a few minutes ago about, and we don't need to go into all of them, but just how few people really understand what the Kentucky auditor does. And as I see it, you're essentially the watchdog of governmental agencies to make sure that they're handling money correctly, so that there's full transparency, so that there's no illegal activity being done, for lack of a better term.
And it's multiple. We're kind of like the guardrails because we help people stay compliant. The majority of people want to follow the rules. We do quite a few audits. We do 500-600 audits per year. And most of them want to follow rules, and not all of them are stuff that you would call criminal in nature, just not compliant with the laws. But we do obviously find stuff that is criminal in nature.
So you do. So when we look at audits, and of course the audits are essentially looking at the books for these government agencies. So you're looking at city commissions, you're looking at fiscal courts, you're looking at public hospitals and other governmental agencies too, like the state pension system, the Kentucky retirement system, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes.
Great.
But you look at the books, 500 to 600 audits a year.
That's correct.
How many of those audits do you find problems with? If you could put a number or percentage on, how many?
It's hard to put an exact percentage, and of course, different people will consider. There's findings in multiple audits, but there's a lot of audits that don't have findings. We do a lot of what we do is statutorily required. Specifically our financial statement audits. When we audit the fiscal courts, we audit sheriffs, we audit county clerks, and then we also do the statewide single audit, and we also do a lot of special exams that we can talk about here.
I'm curious, if I was in a position of authority, and I have served at the fiscal court level, what kind of response do you get from a magistrate or a judge executive or a county clerk when they say that your number's been drawn? Because there is a drawing, I think, that not every fiscal court is audited every year, but there's some kind of a procedure.
Well, not exactly. Every fiscal court receives a financial statement audit every year. They're supposed to.
Okay.
And but it's not necessarily from us. We have right of first refusal to do their audit, and if they ask to get their own CPA, what we generally do, we will let them get their own CPA most of the time, but we like to be the one that does the audit at least once every 4, no more than once every 5.
Okay, so is it the in-depth audits? I guess I misunderstood.
Sure.
But as far as fiscal courts are concerned, is there in-depth audit that you will do for a certain number every year, or is that not? Maybe entirely mistaken.
No. From a financial statement audit, they have to have one every year, and especially your fiscal courts, because your fiscal courts generally have bonding, and there are certain bonding requirements, continuing disclosure requirements, and part of that is they have to have an audit. And one of the things we noticed was that there were some of them that weren't quite paying attention to that. So, some of them lost their bonding for not making sure that they've. In addition, we've tried to be as much of a resource as we can to our county officials. So we kind of have started like giving officials notice that you might want to watch when you're bonding, continuing disclosure. We've also, of course, we audit sheriffs and county clerks. We audit them every year. And one of the things that we have done in the auditor's office in the attempt to be a resource, we have also worked with our officials. And since I had 13 years at Kentucky General Assembly and my chief staff had 2 years in the House, 2 years in the Senate, we've advanced several pieces of legislation to help both state government and county governments be efficient, effective, and ethical. For instance, in 2018, we were able to get passed the Senate Bill 144, which is what we call our AUP bill, which basically says that for your sheriffs and your county clerks, if you have a clean financial statement audit or a fee audit, the year before, you can apply for an AUP. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important for multiple reasons, but primarily because we charge for our audits, and we initially figured that it would save 25 to 50% on the cost of the audits. In reality, it looks like it's going to save them, 50% plus. The other thing it does, the auditor's office, like every other part of government, is having to do more with less. So it allows us to prioritize, take auditors off low-risk audits, which these are typically low-risk audits, and put them on more high-risk audits.
That's good. So tell us a little bit about how big is the staff? What kind of a budget do you have to work with? Because you are responsible for auditing all the state agencies.
We have about 135 people, give or take on any day. And certainly about half of those are in Frankfurt. About half of those are out in the field in the counties.
So do you have field offices across?
No. What happens is for our county auditors, they will typically go into the courthouses and gather their documents and do that. And then some of them will go back home and compile those. And they have internet, and we have a VPN where they can get their information to us and make sure that that's secure and safe. But certainly they stay busy.
They certainly do. And how big is the budget that you have to work with?
It will be like 17 million, give or take 17.5, depending on what fiscal year.
So, Mike, tell us some of the qualities that a good auditor will have. You came from the state legislature.
Sure.
You served for how many? 10 terms?
I served for 13 years. I served for basically almost 7 terms. Now, oddly enough, we were talking earlier. I was actually I ran twice and lost twice. When I first won, I was actually the first Republican state representative from Boyle County in 102 years. Okay. And then, of course, went on and served 13 years prior to being elected auditor. So
kind of a trailblazer, aren't you?
Yeah. Try
breaking the political mold in Boyle County.
And let me be clear in regards to the auditor's office. I tell everybody, matter of fact, the very first thing I did when I entered the auditor's office is I told all our staff, I don't want you to target anyone. I don't want you to give anybody a pass. I just simply want you to follow the data. So that's kind of our slogan there.
So let me press into that a little bit.
Sure.
So if you had to tell that to your staff, does that mean that was happening before? What led you to say that?
Well, it may have been. It was just it was my own personal, because the auditor's office, it's elected as a partisan. But, I think the auditor's office specifically should be when I was in the state house, I served all my constituents, whether they're Republican or Democrat. You're a Republican in a heavily Democrat area, you want to do that, but you should do it anyway. But I just felt like that the auditor's office, when I walked through that door, I should take my partisan hat off, put on my nonpartisan independent hat, and we should do that.
So what I'm hearing from you then is one of the qualities of a good auditor is to be nonpartisan, to be independent,
Correct.
To be fair in your treatment, regardless of the political affiliation of those leaders that you're auditing.
Or the level of power. One of the audits we did the very first audit of AOC, which is not the interesting young lady.
AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
Well, that's what I say, not the interesting young lady in Washington, D.C.
But she's not in Kentucky.
Yes,
okay.
but the administrative offices of the courts. And the Chief Justice did invite us in, and we had about 20 findings. Now, one of the findings we had, unfortunately, they had leased space for one of the justices from a company owned by his 2 sons, and it just happened to be 3 times higher than the next closest. But the one that shows that we hold everybody accountable, now that definitely is one we show everybody accountable. But we also had a finding on there where the Chief Justice's wife had requested that they purchase about $400 in personally engraved mint julep cups to give to other justices throughout the country who are coming to a conference. And although that sounds nice, that is taxpayer dollars. And from a standpoint, we have, so that was something that we wrote them up for. And we got a little pushback, not necessarily from them, but, from some of the members of one of the committees. And I had to tell them, I said, now listen, we write up sheriffs and county clerks for spending $20 or $30, basically that is deemed for personal use, and we hold them accountable. So we've got to hold, whether it's a sheriff or a county clerk or whether it's the Chief Justice Supreme Court, we have to hold them accountable equally Otherwise, we're not doing our job.
So did they did not spend that state tax dollars for those mint julep cups?
Well, they had already done that, and I can't recall whether those were reimbursed or not. But certainly they did not embrace all of our recommendations. But I appreciate the Supreme Court in embracing many of our recommendations. I was disappointed in a few things they didn't embrace, but I was pleased they embraced several of them.
So I want to go back to some of the qualities of a good
Sure,
auditor.
sure.
So what I'm hearing in this story you just told me about the audit of the Kentucky Supreme Court.
Yes, Administrative Office of the Courts. Yeah.
AOC.
Yes.
But is to be fiscally responsible.
Correct.
To be conservative with the taxpayer dollars.
Sure.
But then also to full transparency
Exactly.
in what they're doing as well.
Exactly.
And sometimes there's pushback against being fully transparent.
Sure.
How do you address a situation where you have a public agency that's withholding information or does not want to be fully transparent and let the information out there to the public?
Well, we press for it. Obviously, we are supposed to have access to all that information as the auditor's office. Even we have access to things that perhaps may not be available to everybody else. And, we press for it. And we actually do have subpoena power. We haven't chosen to use it just yet, but if we felt like we needed to, we would.
So do you have a legal branch, a legal arm to the
No.
auditors?
Well, we have a general counsel, but we do have subpoena power. Now, we don't have prosecutorial power, and I think that gets confused some. I know, unfortunately, my opponent had gone to one of the local newspapers, I think down in Glasgow, and it said we'd had no referrals, which was really ridiculous. We've had multiple referrals. I mean, and we've actually had several prosecutions, based on those referrals. But we ourselves did not prosecute them. We referred them for prosecution. So if we have somebody that is not performing the way they're supposed to be from a standpoint they're breaking what we perceive to be, some law, we refer those to either the Attorney General, the FBI, some of the local ethics boards, sometimes the Treasury. And to be honest with you, we had a perfect example of that is the former Jackson County Treasurer. She had actually written herself about $114,000 in additional checks, and that was bad enough, but about half of those were from the general fund and half of those were from federal funds. And once she wrote it from federal funds, then we were able to refer that to the FBI, and they have sought and got an indictment. And so they're still waiting on sentencing on that particular one.
So as you look at the financial dealings of various government agencies, Mike,
Yes.
What have you discovered about the financial health of these various governmental entities?
I think the state as a whole, we do have some concerns because in addition to doing these financial statement audits, we also have been doing, really the first time for any auditor that I'm aware of, what we call data bulletins. And one of the data bulletins we did was the debt data bulletin. Now, and we look at the information that's already out there. People have access to this.
So what did you say that again? That you call it the debt data bulletin?
Well, the debt data bulletin.
Okay.
We looked at just the state debt. Now, this is information that's already out there for anybody to have, but we like to take it and kind of distill it down so that the average citizen can wrap their mind around where we're at. And on the debt data bulletin, we showed that the state had $54.8 billion with a B, in debt, and unfortunately about 80% of that was the unfunded pension liability. Now, if you take that $54.8 billion, you divide it by every man, woman, and child in the state of Kentucky, that's about $12,300 for every man, woman, and child in Kentucky. Now, I will say that over the last 3.5 years, the state has really made a turnaround, and we're heading in the right direction, especially with our pensions. Our current governor is the first governor that's ever, that to my knowledge, it may be in the years past, but not in 20, 30 years, fully funded the pension arc. And they've done it with good data, which means they had to put in even more money. So from that standpoint, our pension system still have a long way to go, but they are turning around. I jokingly say it's kind of like the ship has finally turned around, heading back to the dock, but we're still 30 years away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that amount of debt that Kentuckians have is concerning $54+ billion.
$54.8 billion.
50, it's almost 55.
Yeah.
How does that compare to other states?
I'm not sure how it compares to other states. I think from the standpoint we were just really looking at ours, but certainly it is concerning. So
I want us to talk about the Kentucky retirement system. You did an audit of KRS recently, and you found that they weren't complying with the law passed by the legislature that required a couple things. One is more transparency from KRS as far as to their investments and how much they're paying their investment managers.
Sure.
And then also accountability. There was a story, by the way, in the Louisville Courier-Journal yesterday.
Yes.
That talked about that, and the pension KRS spokesperson said, no, we're following the law, and they disputed your findings.
Well, and of course, Senate Bill, what it was, because we had already done what we would consider a financial statement audit last year for KRS. What this was a special examination of compliance of KRS, KTRS, and JFRS, and that's basically your state workers, your teachers, and your legislators and judicials. The compliance with Senate Bill 2, and there we had a couple of additional things we did beyond Senate Bill 2 compliance, but we were looking at primarily at the transparency provisions. And of course now KRS, I don't know if you've watched any of the testimony, but whenever they testify challenging what we've done, the comment they use, very political in nature, they say, we are complying with the law to the best of our ability. That is different than saying we are complying with the law.
So let me take a step back. KRS stands for Kentucky Retirement System.
Correct.
And that encompasses all of the different...
There are five underneath KRS. And KRS is basically KERS, which is the Kentucky Employee Retirement System. KERS hazardous and KER non-hazardous. You've got CRS or CERS, which is the counties, and you've got CERS hazardous, non-hazardous, and then you have your state police. So they are basically the umbrella for five retirement systems. KTRS obviously is just the teachers.
Kentucky Teachers Retirement System. And is that the largest retirement system?
Yes.
All of those?
Yes, of the funding and everything, yes. And then JFRS, which is your judicial retirement and your basically your state legislative retirement. So,
now, you are a member of the KRS, Kentucky Retirement System Board. You sit on that board.
I am not on KRS's board. I sit on Public Pension Oversight Board.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And we actually, as part of the Public Pension Oversight Board, we do review all the retirement systems, both with reviewing potential laws that can improve getting them back on track, as well as monitoring what laws have already been passed.
So with this finding in your recent audit of the KRS, Kentucky Retirement System,
KRS, KTRS, and JFRS, yes.
Okay. So you found that they were not in compliance with the law passed last legislative session, two legislative sessions ago, Senate Bill 2?
Yes, Senate Bill 2 of 2017. So they were not compliant. Now, they were trying to move in that direction, but there were both KRS and KTRS. They had more than 80% of their contracts that were not posted, whether they were redacted or not. KRS now was basically abdicating their role in allowing the investment managers to redact information, and they didn't have a process in place for them to give explanations why. KTRS, on the other hand, they were actually they had a process in place for redactions, but one of the things they were doing is even after the investment managers made redactions, they were coming back and redacting more, and they also had 80% or plus contracts not posted when Senate Bill 2 was quite clear. Now, one of the things KRS brought up was the fact that there was an Attorney General opinion, but that Attorney General opinion was from 2016. Senate Bill 2 was passed in 2017.
So according to the Louisville Courier-Journal yesterday, they said to the newspaper reporter the law didn't require them to post before because those contracts included confidentiality clauses that Kentucky must respect that required that they not be publicly disclosed.
And that is not correct. Senate Bill 2 did have some what we call non-codified language in it for some exemptions, but those exemptions did not apply to the posting of contracts. Those exemptions applied more towards 45A, which is procurement code.
So Senator Jimmy Higdon is on that board,
Yes.
that oversight board. He
Yes.
says that there will be legislation coming up in the 2020 General Assembly session.
That's my understanding.
So that appears to be the step that they're going to take to clarify any of the misunderstandings or any perceived loopholes in this.
And the other thing is Senate Bill 2 was a wonderful bill to add transparency, but the downside of Senate Bill 2, it really had no enforcement mechanism. The only enforcement mechanism it has is for us to shine, like anything, shine the light on a situation of non-compliance. So I think it would be important, and I think they need to work with the stakeholders. I think they need to work with KRS, they need to work with KTRS, they need to work with JFRS. I mean, it's not our goal. It's our goal to make sure that these retirement systems are transparent for two reasons. One, you've got people that have paid in all their life that are depending on making sure that they have the funds. And then two, you've got taxpayers who've basically been propping up the mistakes of the past. And it's important for us to make sure that the people that are owed a retirement get a retirement, but it's also important for us to be transparent with our taxpayers and making sure that they're getting the best bang for the buck, for lack of a better word.
And that's part of the job of the auditor.
And that's part of the job. I usually tease our treasurer, Allison Ball. She talks about being the watchdog, and I say, well, technically, you're the watchdog on the front end, I'm the watchdog on the back end, and we got both your dog covered on both sides. So,
and you both have some bark, right?
We both have some bark,
and a little bit of bite.
Bark. Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
So, Mike, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as the current Kentucky auditor, either in the capacity as auditor or maybe just generally? Kind of going back to what I was asking before about some of the challenges facing Kentucky financially.
Sure.
What are some of the challenges?
Well, I think probably the only challenge, of course, we've got a great team. Our staff is wonderful, but it's always a challenge to recruit. Just from a standpoint of, for so long, we have not been competitive with the private sector. And certainly a lot of people we train gets appropriated either through the private sector or from other governmental agencies.
So when you say recruit, you're looking for
new auditors.
So
you asked me earlier what makes a good auditor, and of course I know you were talking about the Kentucky Auditor of Public Accounts, but also when we recruit, an Auditor 1, which is, the first step in our merit system for Auditor 1, has to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree and 20 hours of accounting. And then, of course, we can get them in, we can, work with them and get them trained. We have worked to make sure that we kind of get everything set up so that we can retain, work for, recruit, and retain good auditors.
I saw one of your postings for an opening in southeastern Kentucky, I believe it was, for an Auditor 1 position. Starting salary is $41,000 a year.
Yeah. We were able to get that up just recently.
Is that enough to be competitive with the private sector, though? Because if you have a college grad with an accounting degree, it's a very valuable degree.
It didn't used to even be that high. We've just recently got it up a little bit from what it was. Now, I will say this, where we compete very well, especially out in the counties, is, it's you have like a local position. It's a good paying position. But the other thing where we compete is family, because from a standpoint, so many of these CPA firms are wonderful firms, but it's you work a ton of hours. And this basically allows them. We have we have reasonably flexible hours. It's basically a 40-hour week. Occasionally, you have to work a little bit more, but we have a lot of flexibility in that. Whereas some of these CPA firms, you might work 60, 80 hours a week.
So how many openings do you have right now?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look. We're always posting. We're always looking. We're always recruiting. So if someone is wanting to find either a profession or a backup profession when they're in college, be sure to pick up 20 hours of accounting. We'd love to have you apply for one of our roles.
My son is majoring in accounting right now.
Fantastic.
And he'll be graduating in a year and a half. I may send him your way if he's
Now, I will say for the merit ones, I'm not directly involved with the higher merit. I'm directly involved with non-merit, but not merit. But certainly we're always posting, always promoting, so he can follow us either on Facebook or Twitter at auditor.ky.gov and see what we've got available. Of course, you've seen what's available, so it would be good for him to apply. We'd love for him to apply.
Very good, very good. Mike, we've got just a few minutes here.
Sure.
I want to get back to the election. Of course, you are on the ballot this November.
I am on the ballot.
You have a challenger out of Louisville, Sherry Donahue.
Yes.
I want to go back to 2015 when you first ran for this position.
Yeah.
You were considered an underdog candidate. You were running against a well-funded candidate, Adam Edelin, who was considered a rising star in the Democratic Party. Of course, he just ran for Democratic governor in the primary. But he outspent you in that election, $800,000. You only raised about $40,000.
He had about $800,000, and I had about $40,000. He also, to the best of my knowledge, had 2 super PACs. Rachel Maddow had described him as the next up-and-coming Southern Democrats, similar to Bill Clinton. And we were just blessed. You know, it was the underdog of underdogs. And just, I'll do it real quickly, but about 3 weeks before the election, God laid on my heart to get 5 stones, like the David and Goliath, because it was a David and Goliath. And my wife had given me as a gag gift a few years ago, because I'd always wanted a rock tumbler as a kid. And I don't know if you know what rock tumbler is, but it's So anyway, but I had never used it, but I pulled it out, and there were 5 stones. Now, they weren't smooth like David's. My wife tells me they could have been if I had used her rock tumbler. But I stuck those in a bag. And of course, I kind of, sometimes we argue with our Father, our Heavenly Father, but I argued with him a little bit. But, in the end, you do what your Father tells you to do. Yeah. And so I stuck those in a pot. And about 2 weeks before, a good friend of mine, who was the legislator, was actually of the opposite political persuasion. I was telling him about it. And he was like, I got this book for you to read. I'm like, man, I'm running like 450 miles a day, one Saturday, 650 miles in one day, 5 spots. But he said, no, I'll mark a few pages. So it was the David and Goliath book, and the 11 pages he marked basically indicated that there was several things in there, but the primary thing that I got out of it said that the underdog wins a third of the time. And the reason that the underdog wins a third of the time is because they have to be creative. And there's a lot more to that story, especially on election night, but we don't really have time.
You pulled it off. He won by a few, 3-4 percentage points.
Yeah, I had 52. I think he had 48. I was down 9 points in the polls the night before. So
there's a story there that you, just because somebody is in power, considered the rising star, has a lot of money, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll win. Now, you're the guy that's in office now.
Right.
You do have a challenger. You are on the ballot on November the 5th.
Correct. Actually, 2. So
we've got just a minute here.
Sure.
So tell the voters why they should vote for you in just 60 seconds.
Sure. Well, I mean, basically, I've always served everybody. To the best of my ability. Of course, you can go to MikeHarmon.com if you want to find out some of the great work we've done. We've worked diligently. We've had a follow the data attitude. We don't turn anyone, don't give anybody a pass. And certainly we are an auditor of first. We did the very first audit of the CLEP Fund, making sure the Kentucky Law Enforcement Foundation Program Fund, making sure that our dollars that are supposed to be spent towards police and fire are spent. We did the first audit of AOC, as we talked earlier. Have the endorsement of the Kentucky Right to Life. Although I haven't officially got the endorsement from the NRA, I have talked to them, and I'm supposed to be getting their endorsement. I also got the endorsement of the FOP, and certainly we appreciate everybody out there. But I would just encourage everybody to make sure they go to the polls. And I even tell everybody, even if they're not going to vote for me, it's important to go vote. I mean, turnout is low, but we would certainly appreciate your vote. And if you got any extra dollars, MikeHarmon.com is also good for the campaign. So,
Mike Harmon, candidate for Kentucky Auditor of Public Accounts, thank you for joining us, and best wishes to you on the campaign trail.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Nelson with the Commonwealth Policy Center. You can find more of our videos on YouTube and Vimeo. And for more information about the Commonwealth Policy Center, go to our website, commonwealthpolicycenter.org.